to our show. Welcome to our show. It's a good show. Big, big shoe. It's really huge.
Hello, this is Caleb Emerson, director of Die You Zombie Bastards and Frankie and Blunderland. I was also Carl Jr. in Poultrygeist, and I was also Dex Diaper in Citizen Toxie, The Toxic Avenger Part 4, and you're listening to Talkin Troma with Zack Bynes.
It's a good show. Big, big shoe. It's really huge. Welcome to the show.
Tromaville, and welcome to episode 8 of Talkin Troma with your host, me, Zack Bynes. The show where me and a guest think of obscene versions of the Oscar Mayer Wienermobile by watching a Troma movie and then pairing it with a non-Troma title for a fantasy double feature. But first, let me introduce my guest. He is a filmmaker, having directed such films as Die You Zombie Bastards and Frankie and Blunderland. He fought the Toxic Avenger in Citizen Toxie and turned into a zombie chicken in Poultrygeist, Night of the Chicken Dead. Let me introduce to you, Caleb Emerson.
What's up, Talking Troma world?
Hey, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.
I gotta admit, we worked on Poultrygeist together, and when I first saw you on set, I totally geeked out in my head from seeing you in Citizen Toxie.
Troma is weird like that. I was in Citizen Toxie for 3-4 minutes. I mean, I'm in one scene or two scenes, but I'm a minor character, and I have 2 or 3 lines. And when you're in one of those movies, any Troma movie, but especially a Toxic Avenger movie, man, people remember it forever.
Well, and not only do you only have 2 or 3 lines, but you have the most iconic line in that movie.
Oh my God! It's the Toxic Avenger! Tromaville's favorite hideous uniform creature of superhuman size and strength!
And I fell into that part. That part was supposed to be played by the guy, I forget his name, but he was in Terror Firmer. The guy who was Debbie Rochon's boyfriend or something.
Okay.
I forget his name. But it was the Diaper Mafia was supposed to be Yaniv, Trent, and him, because it was 3 of the main guys from Terror Firmer. And it was one of those things where we had a last minute scheduled on-set rehearsal where Lloyd demanded that everyone be there in costume. And they found out he decided the night before or something. And we were filming in Poughkeepsie. So someone called this guy and said, hey, by the way, you have to be in Poughkeepsie tomorrow at 8 a.m. to do this run through. And he's like, what are you fucking talking about? No one told me about this. I can't. So Lloyd just said, fuck him. Fuck him. Have fucking Caleb do it. Have Caleb stand in. So I stood in for the rehearsal. And Lloyd said, yeah, Caleb was great. Fuck that guy. Fuck him. So got the part. And I felt bad because the guy didn't do anything wrong. But that's how I wound up in that. I was a PA on the movie, by the way. That's why. I mean, I was already there working.
So I guess let's rewind back to when did you first know about Troma movies?
When I was a kid, renting VHS tapes when I was 12, 13, 14, Toxic Avenger and Bloodsucking Freaks and Nukem High and all those classics. So that would be late 80s.
Would you say Toxie was probably the first one you saw, or?
Toxie or maybe First Turn On. Because my older brother used to have parties of kids that would come over and rent movies, and he would fall asleep early, and then I would come down and watch movies with his friends, and they rented a lot of mid to late 80s, not porn, but sexy comedies.
Yeah.
First Turn On was a big one, and Taking It Off was a big one. I saw Taking It Off way too many times when I was too young to have seen Taking It Off.
What got you the filmmaking bug? Because I assume before you worked on Citizen Toxie, you were making your own movies.
Yeah, I made, shitty shot. My dad had a VHS-C camera when I was a kid, and my friends and I used to make stupid things with ketchup blood and hot dog guts and stuff like that. And then I went and studied film in college. I didn't go to film school, but I went to art school and majored in film. So I made a lot of stuff in college, which is how I wound up hooking up with Troma. Right. I guess I would have been a senior right when Lloyd's first book came out, the one with James Gunn. He was doing a book tour, and I went and to get his autograph at a book signing in Boston, and brought him a VHS tape of some of the 16 millimeter shorts I made in college. And that was right before they shot Citizen Toxie.
Did you find out about working on Citizen Toxie from that meeting, or was it kind of like Poultrygeist, where they had a casting call out?
No, it was I kind of wound up on Citizen Toxie because the guy Joe Cortez, who was doing acquisitions for Troma, I think was sick of me calling him, because I gave Lloyd that tape for no reason other than that I was a fan, and I said I want Lloyd to see my movies. And, there was no internet really back then, so there wasn't much of a market for short films. I just wanted him to see them. And a few weeks after I gave him that tape, someone, Joe from Troma, called me and said, "Hey, we're actually thinking of putting out a compilation of short films, and we want to include one of your short films on it." And I said, "Fuck yeah!" So I signed a deal with them and went to New York, took the bus. I didn't need to. I could have just shipped it, but I wanted an excuse to go. Yeah. And I took the bus to the old Troma building and brought all my deliverables and, signed for them to distribute my short film. And then a few months went by, and I would call Joe and be like, "Hey, when's that coming out?" And he was like, "I don't know, in a few months." And then I would call back a few months later and go, "Hey, when's that coming out?" And I don't know. And then finally, one of the last times I called him, he's like, I have no idea when or if this is ever coming out, dude. But this summer, we're making a new Toxic Avenger movie. You want to come work on it? And I went, fuck yes, I want to come work on a Toxic Avenger movie. And I quit my job, and that would have been 1999. And I went and spent the summer in Poughkeepsie. And then it did wind up coming out because that was before they had any Troma dance festivals. Okay. And then I don't remember, that would have been like 2000 or 2001. They had the first Troma Dance Film Festival ever, and they played my short film in that, and then released a VHS compilation called The Best of Troma Dance. And then that had one of my shorts on it.
And that short is Red's Breakfast.
Red's Breakfast 2.
2.
Dawn of the Red.
So when I was in high school, I picked up The Best of Troma Dance Volume 1, and it's a fun, if anybody out there hasn't picked it up, it's one of the better of the Best of Troma Dance
there's
DVDs.
Great. Lita Marb's film is on there, and Cyrus Helf's Zit Lover, that Psychotic Odyssey of Richard Chase. There's really good stuff on it.
But your short is one of the movies that made me want to make movies, and just seeing that there's somebody else out there who appreciated Texas Chainsaw Massacre like I did. And like
that's awfully, didn't know that.
Like, I thought it was so funny. I even referenced Red's Breakfast in a short film I made.
Get out.
Yeah. So there's a shot in your film where the actress takes a drag off of a cigarette and flicks it, and then she just like crushes it out on the ground after flicking it like 20 feet away, and she's just like crushing nothing. And I thought that was the funniest thing. So in my short Unicorn, I have my friend, partner, filmmaker Richard Taylor. He does the same thing as a direct, homage or ripoff from Red's Breakfast.
I love it. Well, thank you.
and that was before we even came to Poultrygeist. So it was kind of like oh my gosh.
Well, that warms my heart.
Well, good. On Citizen Toxie, how long was that shoot?
I was there for probably, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks of pre-production maybe. And then it was like a month of shooting, or 5 or weeks or 6 weeks or something like that. Probably similar to Poultrygeist, but I was there the whole summer. So a while. I lived, at the beginning when I first went, they were still in New York. They hadn't gone to the location yet. So they had a rented office. I had never really spent much time in New York, so I don't know exactly what the neighborhood was, but it was kind of gross.
Yeah.
They had a rented office where they, had a makeshift production office where they were having auditions and stuff. And I went and I just slept there because I had nowhere else to go. So I slept there for, I don't know, 2 weeks maybe. And there was no shower or no anything really. It was pretty fucking gross. And we had to do a couple trips up to Poughkeepsie for like location scouting and stuff. And I feel like I took the train to those. And then we moved into Poughkeepsie, and there were 2 main locations. They rented one like in a abandoned, or not abandoned, but vacant office building. So there was like a bunch of little offices and a gym style shower where mostly everyone lived. There was probably like, I don't know, 30 or 40 people living there. And then there was another space where there was a production office, and they built a few sets in it. And there were like the 5 or 6 of the elite types got to stay there. So like halfway through, I wound up getting to stay there, but like that's where Trent lived, and Patrick, the producer, and not the elites, but the older people, the non 19 and 20-year-olds.
the alumni. Was the living conditions on Citizen Toxie, were those pretty similar to Poultrygeist? On Poultrygeist, for those out there, we all lived in an abandoned church with one shower.
Well, I mean, Poultrygeist, at least it was a livable building. I mean, it wasn't like rat infested or rotten. I mean, it was kind of, the one bathroom thing was pretty fucking rough, but Poultrygeist wasn't really that bad. Citizen Toxie was pretty bad. I mean,
it seemed like it from the behind the scenes on there. Like, it's like, it looks like we had a little bit better living condition on Poultrygeist.
Yeah. The bathroom, the living conditions on Poultrygeist weren't that bad. Citizen, and I feel like Citizen Toxie, I feel like there were a lot more people.
Do you think they maybe pared down some of those, just the amount of people from, I mean, this is just me going from the documentary, but it seemed like there was a lot more drinking and fighting that happened on Citizen Toxie than Poultrygeist?
Yeah, it was way worse, but it didn't affect me as much because I didn't have as high a position on it. So it was more fun.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine being Patrick or Trent on that production because they were in charge of everyone, whereas I was in charge of no one. And then on Poultrygeist later, I wound up being in charge of people. But I think Gabe and Andy and Kyle and I ran a much tighter ship than they did on Citizen Toxie. Not because of anyone's fault. It was just a way more chaotic production. There were a lot more locations and a lot more characters and a much bigger cast and way more that could go wrong.
Because we really only had, other than the couple of sets at the church we lived in, maybe 3 locations total. Yeah.
And honestly, not that much drama on Poultrygeist. There was some, but like Citizen Toxie, like you just mentioned, there were a couple fights. I feel like there were a lot more people fucking each other, which winds up causing problems down the road. And it was much more of a mess. A lot more people got fired. I mean, that's why at the beginning, the first couple weeks, I was a PA just doing whatever. I did like the boom in some points, and I helped with some art stuff. And like 2 weeks into production, maybe, or maybe it was even a week or 2 into shooting, there was like a mass boiling point where a bunch of people got fired and a bunch of people quit all on the same day. And it seemed like the movie was going to shut down or something. And Lloyd, of course, just said, fuck it, fuck them all. And just picked a few of the PAs who he thought were the most conscientious and sort of promoted us and said, all right, you're going to do his job. You're going to do her job. She's going to do that job. And fuck it, we're going to keep going. And That's why I wound up being the casting director, which, I mean, the movie was already cast, but I was doing a lot of casting of like bit parts and extras and stuff like that. Actor person.
All the actor persons.
Yeah. He wound up rehiring the girl who he fired to assist me to make sure that I was doing her job correctly, which made me feel kind of bad. But I guess he fired her, but she didn't want to leave. So he said, fine, you can stay. You could stay around, but you have to help Caleb do your job.
Oh, jeez. I heard at one point, and maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but I heard that Dave Brockie, who was Oderus Urungus in Gore, was supposed to play the Toxic Avenger. Do you know if that's accurate or not?
Yeah, he was. I mean, I don't know how far it went, but he was supposed to, from what I remember, he was supposed to play the Noxious Offender. There, which wound up, Dave Matty wound up playing both, but there was going to be different people playing Toxie and Noxie, the alternate universe version. So Dave Brockie was going to be the bad Toxie, and from what I remember, he was in rehab or AA or something at the time, and I think that was sort of newish for him. So he said he wanted to do this, but like one day a week or something, he had to be brought back to someplace for meetings or something like that. Something very honorable that he needed to do, and Lloyd wouldn't accommodate, so he didn't do it. They were gearing up for Citizen Toxie to be a much bigger production and more of a celebration of Troma than it wound up being. Like Dave Brockie was going to be Noxie, and Jenna Jameson was going to be playing Sarah.
Oh, geez.
And she, I guess, and again, I don't know how far this went, but I know that people were talking to her, and she objected to the rape scene where Sarah gets raped, and said that she was going to be in it but didn't want to do the rape scene. And Lloyd doesn't like anyone to sort of object to anything. I mean, not in a cruel way, but just in a, if people start making demands in advance, I think that really turns him off and makes him think it's not worth it.
Yeah, they'll go back on stuff later down the road when they're already on film.
That's the impression that I got, and from what I remember, and that was just people talking in the office. I don't know. That was all stuff that happened before I got there.
And then you came back for Poultrygeist. First, talk about like what made you even want to come back, because working on a Troma movie is a pretty grueling and hellish experience. Like, I liken, the only people who can relate to somebody who worked on a Troma movie is somebody else who worked on a Troma movie.
That is true.
Almost like if you go to if you were in the Vietnam War, you could probably relate to somebody in the Korean War. So, what made you want to go back?
It's totally a fraternity in that way, and that when you meet someone who's done it, even if you don't know them, there's kind of an instant nod of recognition. They're like, yeah, you know what it's about.
Yeah, you've been through the shit.
Yeah. But what, I don't know. I can't think of a happier time in my life than working on Citizen Toxie. So I sort of went there. I'd finished film school, and I went to Citizen Toxie to learn how to make a movie, because I wanted to make my own movie. And right after Citizen Toxie, I did. I spent a couple years making a movie, and right around the time that I finished it, I had done a couple other things with Troma over the years. Like Lloyd came twice to the Rhode. I lived in Providence, Rhode Island at the time, and he came and did master classes at the Rhode Island Film Festival, and I was sort of his local guy who he would have come drive him around and help out. So I was in touch with them still, and I had just finished my movie in the beginning of 2005, Die Zombie Bastards, and I wanted to try and sell it. And I saw Lloyd somewhere. I flew to AFM. I flew out because he said, if you can come try and sell your movie at AFM, if you also come, I'll pay for your trip, or I'll give you a hotel room or something if you come work for us in the Troma booth at AFM, and then you can also spend some time trying to sell your movie. So I said, yeah, I had never been to LA. So I came out and spent a few days at AFM, and that was right when they were gearing up doing pre-production for Poultrygeist. And Lloyd asked me, he said, "You want to come do it?" He would always dangle the James Gunn carrot. He would say, "You want to come be the AD? You can be the James Gunn. You can be the James Gunn of Poultrygeist. You want to come be the James Gunn? And here's the script. Pick any part you want." And he gave me the script, and I said, "Well, clearly I want to be Carl Jr., even though I'm too old." He's supposed to have just graduated high school, and I don't even know how old I was, 28 or something. I was already bald, but he let me do it, and it was awesome. I probably would have done a third one if there was one soon after Poultrygeist.
I would have definitely been on another one soon after Poultrygeist as well. I was supposed to work on Return to Nukem High, but shit happens.
I went up and was in Return to Nukem High for one day, and I mostly got cut out. I'm in there for a second, but I didn't want to be that. I had been on the other side of this enough times to not want to be the guy who keeps calling, being like, "Hey, Lloyd says I can be in the movie. Find something for me to do. Find something for me to do." But I called and talked to Zack, I think, and maybe Justin, and said, "Tell me to fuck off if you don't have anything for me, but I'd love to come up for a day or two or something if there's a small part. And if there isn't, just tell me and it's fine, because I don't want to be that guy." And they were like, no, you would be great. You need to come up. So I went up, and a already tiny part shrunk even more while I was standing there, and then it shrunk even more, and then I wound up only having 2 lines, and both of them got cut.
But you do see a shot of you as a security guard at Tromaville High.
Yeah, I think it was Zack said I play this character Peanut, who's a cop in Die Zombie Bastards, and then he's a security guard in Frankie and Blunderland, and then he's also a cop in Hamburger the Rapist. And he thought that character was funny or something, and he said, "Oh, come up and be a school security guard and be Peanut. Can you shave a mustache and be that guy?" So I said, "Sure," but then I did, and it was a huge waste of time.
I will say, because I am a fan of Red's Breakfast as well, and you play a police officer who I always assumed was Peanut in Red's Breakfast too. So yeah. I did appreciate the reference in Return to Nukem High. So maybe that joke was made for me and Zack.
All right. Glad. If anyone noticed it, I would love it. But so far no one has said, "Oh, I saw you in Nukem High."
So let's talk about your movies. Well, let's talk, I guess, a little more about Poultrygeist real quick. So You're playing Carl Jr., and you have to fuck a chicken. When you saw the behind the scenes where Richard was like, "There might be spiders in that chicken," that was in between your legs. What'd you think about that?
I have no memory of that. What the rubber chicken?
Yeah, so the demon one. And I just watched this a few weeks ago, so I forgot all about it. But there's a demon chicken that you're fucking, and it was sitting in the basement of the church, which the basement where we made the blood was pretty gross. And Richard's like, "I think he's like, I had to clean a bunch of shit out of there. I think there's some spiders inside that chicken."
Oh boy.
So I saw that on the behind the scenes. So I guess that's news to you here.
Well, I mean, someone said it to me at the time. I must have known it, but I don't remember. Or did he say it to me, or did he just say it to the camera or something?
I don't know. I think he might have been there, but he might have just said that to the camera.
I made that chicken, by the way.
Oh, really? I like the look of that chicken. It's fun.
Yeah, before I came out, Andy knew that I did some special effects and asked if I could make some chicken. So I baked a whole chicken and cast it, and then cast a bunch of KFC and made a bunch of the molds of the chicken that they wound up using.
So most of that chicken, almost that chicken that was on set, you cast. I had no idea.
I don't know if it was most of it, but some of it. I mean, I made a bunch and brought it, and then I brought the molds and donated them and said, "Here, use these to make as many drumsticks and stuff as you want."
I don't remember anybody casting any more chicken when I showed up. I remember them.
Well, then those are for me.
That's awesome. How was it juggling, the house filled with punk rockers or film nerds and, acting side of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it was okay. I tried not to, I mean, for the sake of trying to, I was a terrible AD, but for the sake of trying to do that job as good as I can, I tried not to participate into too much socializing with everyone.
Yeah.
Just because I didn't want to be a wet blanket, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So mostly just hung out with Gabe and Andy and Kyle because I was either working on set every single day or getting a tiny bit of sleep. So I don't know. I don't think I managed anyone off set is what I mean. And I didn't really spend a ton of time with anyone off set. I either tried to manage the set, and then as far as like kids in the house and what was going on, that was Gabe and Andy and Kyle Walker.
Yeah, that's kind of, and you got to live in the upperclassmen area at the church.
Lived in Andy Deemer's closet.
I ended up sleeping under the general's desk.
That sounds right.
So that was kind of nice. Like, my head was under his desk. All the blood boys, like, we had enough room just to put our heads under the desk and our feet were all sticking out, but that was the most privacy you got on on the church.
That sounds right.
The poo-poo day with Joe Flyshaker.
Yeah.
Pretty rough.
It was.
Can you talk a little bit about that day?
Well, Joe was in pretty rough physical shape at that point, and he was not very mobile. I feel like he had did he have a walker or canes? He couldn't really move around much, and most of the scenes where he's supposed to be standing and talking, he had to have someone put a stool under him because he couldn't stand for very long. And I don't know if he hadn't been told exactly what was going to be expected of him in the bathroom, or if he just thought he was going to be able to work around it. But he went in there, and from what I remember, as soon as Lloyd said, "Okay, now you fall on the floor and start rolling around," and Joe was just like, "No, I can't do that. I'm going to severely hurt myself." And then what happened? They just hired Ron to do it, right?
Yeah, he was. From what I remember, he's just one of the actor persons who showed up all the time. And
he's a real heavy guy. I mean, nowhere near Joe size.
Yeah.
But he seemed happy to do it. And so they just – I don't even remember. Did we get Joe on the ground? We must have gotten Joe on the ground at some point to get shots of his face, but none of the rolling around or he couldn't flip over. Is that what it was? So maybe that's why we got Ron to roll around and stuff.
I know there's one shot and everybody had to help kind of hoist him to the floor.
Yeah. I mean, he was pleasant about it. He wasn't like a diva, but he was just like, "Listen, I can't do this. Like, if I get down, I'm not going to be able to get back up."
That was probably one of those safety to humans
totally.
moments that was definitely pushing it.
Yeah, he was a really sweet guy.
Yeah, he was awesome. That, and then the effects just didn't work right either.
The shit cannon?
Yeah. I remember Lloyd yelled at me. I had a Baby Ruth, but it wasn't the king size Baby Ruth. But it wasn't a fun size either. It was just a regular Baby Ruth. But he was pissed. He was like, "You went to Columbine. They didn't teach you anything? That's not a good piece of shit." I remember you and Gabe after he said that, you looked at me like, "Are you going to quit?" And I was like, "I didn't go to Columbine."
That sounds right.
But he, that's what he felt like on there. Well, here's something that I don't know if you know, and the people out there don't know. So all the Troma brought all these body parts from the offices.
Okay.
And being a blood boy, they wanted me to go through them to see what we could use, hook blood tubes up or whatever for the huge massacre scene. So they had from Citizen Toxie, Trent Hage's like chest that burst open. That was in there, but none of this stuff has been washed since Citizen Toxie.
Oh, okay.
That was rough. We ended up not using most of it because it was just too disgusting. However, in all that stuff, I found the infamous leg from Redneck Zombies.
Okay.
With the boot and like the sweat pant. And so I kept trying to use it in the movie.
Was it the real one, or was it like did they remake it for something else?
No, it was the real one because it was like in all the stuff from Citizen Toxie, and I know it made its way in there. So I kept trying to have people hold it. They were like, give them guts or something. So I kept trying to get people to hold it. And then Lloyd got really mad at me. He's like, why is this shitty looking leg here? And I was like, that's the one from Redneck Zombies. And he's like, well, fuck it. We already shot something else. So it never made it in the movie. And I'm pretty sure somebody stole it because it's like never.
Oh, I got a bunch of stuff from Poultrygeist that's actually now in Tom Devlin's Monster Museum in Boulder outside of Vegas. Have you been to Tom's Museum?
I need to.
I kept a bunch of the eggs and my costume and a bunch of stuff, and he has a whole little display there of my stuff.
I took a egg, chicken fetus, which never ended up making it in the movie. I took a bunch of like the fast food boxes, but those ended up, just giving to friends and stuff.
Yeah.
I ended up with a whole roll of chicken bunker stickers, but those are about gone at this point.
I've got some Citizen Toxie stuff too. I have the TPPS flag, like the giant red Nazi flag with Toxie's face on it. I took that, and I have armband, and Joe James was one of those guys. Joe James, who wound up playing the other cop in Die You Zombie Bastards, who is now dead. Sadly, he died. I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago.
Well, since you brought up Die You Zombie Bastard, let's talk about that movie. So it is a sequel to the Red's Breakfast shorts.
Sort of, yeah. I mean, I made there's a real short called Red's Breakfast that's like 5 minutes long, and it's just this guy waking up in the morning and pulling very inspired from Bloodsucking Freaks, just pulling a lady out of his closet and cutting open her stomach and eating her guts. And then there's a part 2 where we sort of learn more about that guy and he meets a girlfriend. And then there's a part 3, which is a whole story, like a whole feature-length story, but I framed it like an old chapter serial, and I only shot chapters 1, 6, and 12. So it's the beginning, middle, and end of a feature. And then I made a proper feature that included stuff from all 3 of those redone, and then filled in all the gaps and turned it into a semi-real movie. And that came out, premiered in 2005, came out on DVD in 2007, and will be coming out soon from Troma now.
Ooh. Finally. I remember asking you on Poultrygeist if Troma was putting out Die You Zombie Bastards, and you're like, no, they're not going to put it out.
They offered, but Lloyd wouldn't give me any money. And he just said, come back. If you can't find anyone else, we'll totally release it, but find someone who will give you some money. Someone will give you some money for this. And someone did. And we got fucked over by a bigger distributor who we thought was going to be a better deal going with the bigger distributor, but they totally ignored it and never paid us anything, and fuck them. And we had a 10-year deal with them that just ended a couple years ago, and the movie's been unavailable since then. And now Troma is putting it out just streaming.
It's still exciting though, because that's one I always tell people to watch. I like your music choices in that movie.
Oh, thank you.
You have Hazel Atkins in there, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah. And Jamie Gillis.
Yes. Who kind of weaves in and out of the movie we're going to talk about tonight, like behind the scenes. I've read a little bit.
About Bloodsucking Freaks?
Yeah. He's like friends with the director.
Yeah. Well, he was in Night of the Zombies by the same director, by Joel Reed.
And I guess he was living with the lead actress at the time of making Bloodsucking Freaks?
Sure. I mean, well, he lived in New York and he was involved heavily in the porn scene, and there's a lot of porn people in Bloodsucking Freaks, and he was involved heavily in the S&M scene, which has a lot to do with Bloodsucking Freaks, and he was involved in the theater scene. He was an off Broadway actor, so it would make sense that a lot of Jamie Gillis weaves in and out of Bloodsucking Freaks, much like his character Stavros weaves in and out of Die You Zombie Bastards.
And I love I just remember like the giant like kind of mosquito monsters that attack everybody. It's when you hear the title Die You Zombie Bastards, like it wasn't what I was expecting the movie to be, but it was a lot more fun than I was thinking. I was going from Red's Breakfast, I was thinking it might be, you know, more of like a brutal one, but it was just like a riot. Like I had such a good time watching that movie.
Well, thank you. Here's what's funny. I made that movie because at the time I was trying to think of what to make. And I said, no one has made a zombie movie in like 15 years. And no one makes superhero movies anymore. I don't even care about superhero movies. I just thought it was funny that there hadn't been a superhero movie in 20 years. So in like 1997 or whenever we started writing that, there had been no zombie movies or no superhero movies. And by the time it actually got finished and released, the world did not want any more zombie movies or superhero movies.
that happened with our movie, Adam the Amazing Zombie Killer. By the time it finally found distribution, it's like, well, great. I wish we didn't make a fucking zombie movie. Nobody wants to see that.
I just watched that the other day. When did you shoot that?
So we shot that starting in like 2009, and it took us 4 years to shoot.
Okay.
Shoot and edit and all that.
I couldn't, for the life of me, I was watching it, I was going, if you told me this was shot in 1996, I'd believe you. But if you also told me we shot it last year, I'd believe you. And I could not figure out at all when it was from. So
that's because we didn't know how to use an HD camera.
And I don't mean that as a criticism. It was just, I couldn't figure it out.
We, that was one thing we actually tried kind of intentionally. We made sure no one was really wearing any logos and just kind of went for an everyday look, sort of like what they did in Evil Dead with like Bruce Campbell's clothes, where you can't quite tell when it's supposed to be. And then you made another movie, which you had some Poultrygeist alums help out on, Frankie and Blunderland.
Yeah, I met. Did you encounter Marta much on Poultrygeist?
I was gonna ask. So that was Marta from Poultrygeist. Who
Marta, the lady, Marta Estorado, who came to Poultrygeist to be a PA, and she wound up being in the makeup department. I didn't really talk to her much. She wasn't there that long. She was super nice, but very shy, a little awkward. And a few people came to us, me and Gabe and Andy, and were like, listen, this girl, like, she was doing makeup, like beauty makeup on the actors, but she chain smoked. And a couple of the actors were like, listen, she comes to do my makeup and it's really gross because her hands really smell from cigarettes and she's kind of creeping us out. And I was like, oh, but she's super nice. And they were like, yeah, she's making us uncomfortable. And I had to like go talk to her and be like, listen, I don't know the nice way of saying this, but can you not chain smoke before you do people's makeup? And how do you tell someone to not be awkward? You know, like, but she just, she made some people uncomfortable, and then she wound up going home, and I felt super bad because she didn't do anything wrong. She was just a weirdo. Like, we're all weirdos, but she was her own kind of weirdo. And
she was actually one of the first people I met when I arrived in Buffalo. She kind of showed me and Richard around the house a little bit. She was there maybe like 3 hours before we were, which is like 3 weeks in Troma time.
Sure. And I didn't hear from her for a long time. And then she wrote to me a couple of years later and said that she saw Die You Zombie Bastards and really loved it. And I was already in LA at the time. I moved to LA in 2007. And she said, I wrote a script. Can I send it to you? And I was like, sure. I can't do anything for you. Like, I am out here and I don't have a job. But so if you're trying to like get me to get it to someone, no, but you can just send it to me. And she's like, no, I just want to send it to you because I love your movie and I want to know what you think of it. So she sent me Frankie and Blunderland, and it was nuts. The script is way more nuts than the movie, if you can believe it. And I told her, I was like, listen, this is great. I love it, but you're never going to sell this. If that's what you're looking to do. And she said, no, it's not what I'm looking to do. I just wrote the script, and I don't remember what she said. And then like a year later, I got an itch to make another movie. And I said, I bet I could rewrite this a little bit to make it make a little more sense. I wonder if she'll let me do it. So I asked her, and she said yes. And we spent much like you were just saying, how it took you 4 years to make Adam the Amazing Zombie Killer. Die You Zombie Bastards took like 4 years too, and cost, by my standards at the time, a shitload of money because we shot it on film and we had investors and stuff. So I said, I'm going to make another movie that is not like that. I'm not going to spend hardly anything on it, and I'm just going to make it for fun. So I made that, and she died while the movie was still being filmed. She did come out to LA once and played a little part in it. But yeah, that's what Frankie and Blunderland is. Marta wrote it. I rewrote it a little bit and shot it. Who else was from Carius is in it. And
didn't Tom Devlin help with some effects on it?
Yeah, and he acts in it too. Tom is hilarious in the movie, and he made like the puppet kid, and he made a bunch of the effects. And then Marta and I loved that script so much. We were going to do a follow-up right afterwards. She and I were co-writing a feature-length script called Hamburger the Rapist. And she wrote an outline of what it was going to be about. She and I came up with, I don't even remember now, but she and I came up with an outline, and she was going to start writing the script, and then she died. And I never saw anything she wrote beyond the outline. And then several years later, I got asked to do a fake trailer for that Grindsploitation, which they're now on like volume 37 of or something, where people are making, but this was the first one. A guy said, will you make a fake trailer for this compilation that's all fake trailers? And I said, sort of as a tribute to Marta, I'll make a trailer for Hamburger the Rapist, the movie that we were gonna make as the follow-up to Frankie and Blunderland, because I didn't feel right writing a whole script, at least at the time. Now I'm thinking about it. But at the time I said, I don't know what she was going to come up with, but I'll just take what she and I already did come up with and make a trailer for a fake movie. So I made a trailer for Hamburger the Rapist that's on Grindsploitation Volume 1. And
we'll talk a little bit about Hamburger the Rapist a little bit later in the show. That kind of wraps up the first part of the show.
Sure.
Let's, without further ado, let's talk about Joel M. Reed's 1976 film, Bloodsucking Freaks.
I am Sadhu, master of the theater of the macabre.
Prepare yourself for the horror. Prepare yourself for the terror. Prepare yourself for the ultimate blood-curdling experience.
Blood-sucking freaks!
In all the history of evil, there has never been anything or anyone to equal the demented mind of Sadhu.
Oh, now we're getting the proper reaction.
He was an evil genius of pain, with the most bizarre machines and tools ever created to torture the body of woman. Yes, torture, and torture, and torture, but keeping that once beautiful body alive so it can suffer more and more and more.
But if you are skeptical or bored, then just pretend that what you see is real.
Possessed by his evil, the tortured become the torturers. He turned young virgins into flesh-eating cannibals and set them loose in a frenzy of pain-filled orgies. Sadu, he was the creator and the director. He was the master of
Bloodsucking Freaks.
a show that will make anyone retch.
Here's what Lloyd Kaufman says about Bloodsucking Freaks in his book, All I Need to Know About Filmmaking, I Learned from the Toxic Avenger. Warning, this film is set in a Grand Guignol-type sadomasochistic theater is only for the demented, even among Troma fans. Probably the most fucked up in the Troma catalog. If you're into brainwashing, caged naked teenage girls, dental hygiene snuff films, sucking brains through straws, and what some say is an utter lack of socially redeeming values, this work of art is for you. Bloodsucking Freaks is the single film in the Troma library I feel queasy about distributing. I may have possibly secured my place in hell just by watching it. It's one of those rare films that is actually more offensive now than it was 25 years ago.
Bloodsucking Freaks. I hadn't seen this one in a while.
What do you remember the first time you watched Bloodsucking Freaks?
I sure as hell do. I had read about it in like Fangoria or Gore Zone or something when I was a kid. And I remember reading about how it was like the most offensive movie ever. And it was picketed at the theaters and stuff because it was so horrible. And none of the few video stores in my town had it. And it was on my short list of movies I was dying to see. And then one day I was hanging out with, did you ever watch that show that was on Comedy Central a couple of years ago, about Trump, where they had like the Trump impersonator?
Yeah.
The guy who plays Trump, Anthony Atamanuik, he's a comedian, like a sketch comedian. I went to middle school with that guy and we were friends, and he worked at a video store. And he lived a few towns over, and the video store that he worked at had it. And he said, even though it was like X-rated or no one under 18 allowed to rent it, that he could get it because he worked there. And one day I was at his house and he went and got it, and we watched it at his house. And it did not disappoint.
So the first time I watched the movie, I was getting pretty high on the Troma train at that point. Yep. I seen Cannibal the Musical and the Toxic Avenger and Tromeo and Frostbiter, and I read Lloyd's book, and he talks about it being super extreme, and I was like, oh man, I gotta see this movie, keeping in mind the stuff I've seen before is,
yep,
Class of Nukem High type things. And then I found it at a Suncoast Video. So that and the Toxic Avenger 2, I found both on tape. So I brought it home. I'm like, double feature. I watched Toxic Avenger 2. It's like, all right, time for Bloodsucking Freaks. This is going to be so much fun. And that's when I realized that not every movie that Troma puts out has that same Troma tone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, watching it now, it's so much different now. And I don't know if it's just because I'm older or the movie's way older. I had no idea at the time that this was a satire about the off-Broadway theater scene in New York, because I didn't know anything about that. All I knew about it was how Troma marketed it.
Yeah.
Which is like cages of screaming naked virgins. And watching it now, it's the fucking least erotic thing ever.
Yeah.
But it was like 13 or something. I was like, this movie's amazing. It's got 100 naked women in it. And watching it now, I don't believe I even saw it then.
Yeah, this rewatch of it, the humor hit me a lot harder than it has in the past. Before, it's like, all right, well, here's the brain-sucking scene, or, but hearing the jokes about like the William Morris Agency, I don't think I ever picked up on before.
No, I didn't even know what that was.
That's really funny.
It is.
So just some facts that I dug up before we kind of go into the plot of the movie. So apparently when Troma bought the rights, I got a lot of information from this book called Bloodsucking Freak, which you also read.
I did.
By John, and I'm going to butcher that last name, Spuzner, I'm going to say. But it's a book where he interviews Joel M. Reed, and they go into each of his movies. So there's definitely some debate over how Troma got the rights to this movie.
Right.
Which is kind of interesting. Because Joel M. Reed doesn't seem like a reliable source of information in 1970s. Lloyd also doesn't seem like a pretty reliable source of information either.
Right.
But according to Lloyd, when they got the movie, it was like a rough edit of the film. So they got the editor for the Toxic Avenger and Class of Nukem High, Richard Haynes, to reassemble the movie to how Joel M. Reed wanted it.
Right.
Yes, he also does the voice that says "Bloodsucking Freaks" in the trailer. But Joel M. Reed says this never happened, and he gave Troma a completed film. So
it had already been released. It had been out for a couple years when Troma got it.
Yeah, as the Incredible Torture Show.
Yeah, I've got a one sheet for. So not only had it been out, but it had been advertised and marketed, and I think it had played for a couple years. So I don't know who's got it wrong there.
There's definitely a scene that was cut out, because on the new Troma Blu-ray, there's the original title card and the scene of Ralphus getting a blowjay, which was not in any of the versions I ever seen before.
No, me either.
But,
and my first thought was, oh my God, how could they cut this out? But then I was discussing it with my wife. I called my wife in and I said, you got to see this. Because I said, how well she doesn't always like the same kind of movies as me, but I know that she saw Bloodsucking Freaks. And I said, how well do you remember Bloodsucking Freaks? And she said, oh, I remember it well. Okay, I want to show you this deleted scene. So I showed her the deleted scene, and she was like, wow, okay, that sort of changes a lot. And I went, it does change a lot. How on earth could they cut this out? But then I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, of course they cut it out, because they were trying to market this as a hot, sexy women in cages movie. And if 10 minutes in or 15 minutes in, there's suddenly a gay scene, it changes the dynamic a lot if that's how you're trying to market this movie.
Well, and it's crazy too, because like that scene is maybe like 2 minutes long at the most, but it changes the tone of the entire film.
Yeah. And his performance, do you love me? It's real weird, and it makes all of their other interactions totally different. Like when he has Ralphus come have the women whip him, and he switches the keychain and all that stuff. It changes everything. This was also my first real experience seeing anything about S&M, which at the time as a kid was very confusing and weird.
Yeah, other than maybe the Gimp in Pulp Fiction.
Right, but like seeing this guy who's clearly in charge, and he is the master, but then he's having these women come whip him, and I remember that being very confusing as a kid, and now that's my life. But
and then they said that in the book that maybe it was shot on 16 millimeter. But they never really say for sure if it was, which I think is kind of funny. Yeah, it seems like something you would remember.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like it. Even cleaned up in an HD, it definitely looks like 16, but it could just be real crappy tail ends of 35. But it looks like 16 to me.
And I guess they shot it in like 10 days in the winter of 1975, like all midnight to 6 a.m. shoots in like the basement of a guy who actually was putting on these like S&M shows. It's kind of funny to think about that. The Sardu is based on a real person.
Yep.
But also reading this book, it seems like it might be a little autobiographical of Joel M. Reed as well. I always like going through the IMDb's for all these just to see if anybody else made any other Troma movies. So Joel M. Reed, he put another movie out called G.I. Executioner, which Troma also released, and he had like basically the same band of crew for all of his movies. So his editor, Victor Konevsky, he edited Bloodsucking Freaks, G.I. Executioner, but he also produced and edited one called There's Nothing Out There, which is pretty fun. It's like kind of a send-up of like slasher alien movie that came out.
Directed by his son, Rolf Konevsky.
It's pretty funny. That's what I'm going to talk about on this show at some point. And then the actress who played Maya, Rita Montone, she was in the movie The Children, and she played Dee Stone. But other than that, I didn't find too many other Troma connections. A lot of porn actors in this, and theater actors, which is where Sardou came from.
Yeah,
he's in the Fantastics, and Ralphus, he was in The Anal Dwarf, which I tried to track down to even just see a copy online. I've never seen that. Have you
Don't worry.
Have you seen it?
I've got a copy.
Does it live up to the hype?
Well, what?
The foot long.
Oh, no, I don't know what he's talking about. For a dwarf, he's impressive, but it's a pretty normal looking. But I had this VHS compilation that there was an underground video store in Providence that I used to go to when I was in college, and they had a compilation called Celebrity Porn, and it was like weird, like softcore clips of people who became famous actors that they were in before they were famous, and then other scenes that are claiming to be famous actors who kind of look like them. And there was that clip from The Anal Dwarf was in it, and they claimed that it was Hervé Villechaize in the tape, but it was not. And I said, that's not fucking Hervé Villechaize. That's Ralphus.
And you're like, what? Where's the fact checker for this compilation tape?
So I've got that tape somewhere. I'll digitize it and send it to you.
Perfect. When the movie got put out, Troma made cuts hoping that it would get an R rating, but it like never got an R rating. So they said that it was R rated, and they got sued by the MPAA. And Troma and that's when they learned that they owned the box with the R in it.
Oh, right. Yep.
And then, so this was like kind of debated in the book, that Lloyd was saying that the theater hired the activist group Women Against Pornography to picket the movie. To draw an attention. Joel M. Reed says that Lloyd did it. I could see that being true, but it ended up backfiring on him pretty spectacularly, where they actually got the movie pulled and the theater almost lost their license. The book is pretty interesting, and if you are a fan of Joel M. Reed's movies, you should read it just to kind of hear some of his stories. He goes into talking about, just the cast like having constant orgies all the time, but you can't really tell if he's telling the truth or just trying to get a good interview.
Seems to talk out of his ass a lot.
Yeah. The big thing I got from like reading about it are him and seeing his interviews is like he seemed like quite the asshole, which you he didn't disappoint, I guess. I don't think I want a super friendly dude making Bloodsucking Freaks.
Right.
Oh, and also we should say Ralphus was an Ewok in Return of the Jedi, which is really funny to me.
Yeah, his wife was too, right?
Yeah, I think so. But can you imagine like he's like hanging out with like Warwick Davis and they're like talking about all these other movies, and then he just like, yeah, I'm the Anal Dwarf. Like, what are you in? I'm Ralphus. He's like, I've eaten an eyeball on film.
Mm-hmm. It was cool to see, and maybe this was on the old DVD, but I don't think so. On that new Blu-ray, they have the interviews that Eli Roth did with a couple of the cast and crew members in the 90s. Did you watch those yet?
Yeah, and those were that is on the DVD and the new Blu-ray.
Oh, is it on the DVD? I didn't remember it.
Yeah, and he has like one of the caged women.
Yep, and he has Ernie Peischer, the doctor.
Which is funny because the doctor ended up like being a principal for like a high school. I would have geeked out if my principal was in Bloodsucking Freaks. Like, but well, I guess we're talking a lot about the behind the scenes stuff. Not so much yet about like what happened. So if you haven't seen Bloodsucking Freaks, let's just kind of dive into the plot. So it's about this guy Ralph or Sardou who owns a Theater of the Macabre. It's a Grand Guignol theater where they do torture shows, and it's off Broadway in the 70s. So they torture women in the guise of making high art.
Yes.
And Sardou, he looks like a cross between like Anton LaVey, Ming the Merciless, and like a heroin addict. So,
yeah, that's a really good description, actually.
I wish I could take credit for that. I saw that somewhere. It's like you can't. And
great. He's a really good actor.
It's a shame he was like murdered a couple of years after filming this. But I bet he would have went on to be one of these cult film icons. Oh, totally.
Yeah, he's great.
He has a good like British voice that's like been smoking a carton of like menthol cigarettes every day, and he just has something cool about him, like performance wise. I wish there was more. And Ralphus, he's his sidekick. He's a little person who has a big afro, and I was sending one of my friends pictures from the movie as I was watching it, and in one part he's wearing like a yellow turtleneck and blue overalls, and he was like, "Oh man, he's like a less irritating minion." So now every time I see a minion, I'm gonna think of Ralphus, which that's not a bad thing.
No.
In this first time you see Sardou torturing people, Ralphus is applying thumb screws to a nude woman, and you listen to a lot of metal, Caleb.
Sure.
So this speech that Sardou gives at the beginning of the movie is sampled on like almost every like grindcore band album, at least one.
Perfect.
That or the other, like Her Mouth Will Make an Interesting Urinal. Like those two bits are
sure.
on every grindcore album. So Ralphus is applying thumb screws, and then they put some woman's head in an iron tourniquet and just slowly clamps it away, and then Ralphus rips out her eye.
Yep.
And the audience they just think it's a show. And in the audience, there is a theater critic who he won't even talk about the show because he doesn't want anyone to give Sardou any money. And then there is a football player who's supposed to be Joe Namath, but his name is Maverick in the film. And then a famous ballerina watching the show. So I guess in 1970, whatever, going to the S&M torture theater was quite the Friday night activity.
Absolutely. And the theater critic has what, to me, is in my top 3 favorite character names from any movies ever. In no particular order, those character names are Stathis Borans from the remake of The Fly, Moss Garcia from Christmas Evil, and the theater critic from Bloodsucking Freaks, whose name is Creasy Silo.
Yes. I had to rewind it because when they said his name, at first I thought it was like Greasy Silo.
Yeah.
Which would also be a weird
Creasy
name.
Silo. What the hell kind of name is Creasy Silo? It's great.
I feel like that has to be some sort of inside joke where they're like,
Because those aren't even words, let alone names. Creepy?
Greasy Silo. So they all kind of leave, and Sardu is, trying to get money. But then we see what's really going on. Underneath the theater, Sardu has like a cage filled with naked women where he's, Ralphus is going down there with a torch and a bucket of meat that I guess they got like at a butcher shop down the way, and you're just throwing meat at students from Columbia University.
Yeah.
And then one thing I thought was kind of interesting, because I always wondered, in the movie, the kind of the gore and the sex scenes are pretty, I mean, I guess there's not really sex scenes, but just some of the torturous acts are pretty extreme. And I guess the more extreme acts were all done by porn actresses in the movie. Mm-hmm. Like the whippings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's a scene where Sardu's eating dinner and candle wax is dripping down a woman he's using as a table. So that was a porn actress. But apparently some of these cage actresses, one of them went on to become very famous, but she used a fake name in the movie. So, and no one will give hints on who that is. So I'm just going to say Julia Roberts, because that'd be kind of funny.
Wait, Joel won't even say who it is? He said that someone here went on to be really famous?
Yeah, and in all of, like, the different kind of interviews and like reviews and stuff I've seen, they're like, there's a really famous actress in the cage, but they won't say who it was. So, I mean, it's also pretty good marketing.
Sure. And also, Joel seems to talk so much shit in this book, where everyone he seems to mention, he claims is famous.
Yeah. So, like, I saw this guy, they thought I was famous. Man, there's that part in the book, though, like, where he's like, this S&M stuff doesn't do anything for me. I wouldn't mind seeing somebody get raped by an animal, though. I had to go back. I was like, wait, did I just read what I thought I was like, yep.
Yeah, did. Yep.
So this movie's tame, and he says, the only thing that we didn't film in this movie that I wish we did was the coprophagia. But that was too extreme for me at the time, which that's really like the only thing missing in the movie. Sardu gets the idea to make a big show, and he wants this ballerina in there. So he has Sardu or Ralphus go and kidnap this prima ballerina, and he also kidnaps the critic because he made fun of him before. And how they do that is they get Ralphus to hide in little places with a blow dart gun. So if you didn't have that fear before, and they torture a bunch of women to get the Natalia to say she'll dance, which I have read that John Waters is a fan of this movie, and it wasn't until his last watch, it's kind of the plot of Cecil B. Demented.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
So I don't know if he intended for that reference, or if that just always stuck, but the kidnapping of an actress and torturing people around him to act in their stuff.
Right. Well, that would have been a good double feature too.
What did you think of kind of all those like interstitials with Ralphus and Sardu, where they're just like playing different games with each other?
Well, I think Lloyd is right when he says that this movie is kind of more shocking now than it was then. Just in the misogyny of it is insane.
Yeah, there's, other than at the very beginning of the movie when you see Natasha before she's brainwashed, right, none of the women in the movie seem like they're anything more than just fodder for Sardu and Ralphus.
But it's so I do love the glee of this movie of Ralphus's, when he does his little dances to celebrate everything, and the relationship between Ralphus and Sardu, even without the extra blowjob scene, is fascinating.
It's crazy, just that scene in there. Like, I have such a different feeling of this movie.
Yeah.
Because the scene that they added with him saying "I love you" and all that, then it's like, oh, it's almost like a weird dating relationship when they're playing like backgammon and chopping off women's fingers or darts with the human dartboard. So, and then there's the infamous scene with the dentist who
it's the greatest.
Yeah. There's this dentist who comes in. He's a doctor, or I guess he's a doctor, not a dentist. He comes in to make sure that Natasha isn't going to die. And instead of paying him, they let him torture one of the women in a cage, and he pulls out all her teeth.
Because he really always wanted to be a dentist. Or did he say my mother always wanted to be?
Yeah, he said, Mommy always wanted to make me a dentist, or wanted me to be a dentist. And then he cuts off her hair, shaves her head, and drills a hole through the top of her head. And I remember seeing that the first time, just like, it doesn't look real, but it's still pretty unnerving. That whole,
yeah, like when the pill goes in, you can see the latex twirling around with it and stuff, but it's pretty gross. It's still pretty gross now.
And then, he puts a straw in there and starts sucking out her brains and blowing bubbles while, singing opera.
Yep.
That scene was kind of weird, and I wanted to know what you thought about it. So Ralphus and Sardou, they're watching him do this, and they just get disgusted by what he's doing. And I wanted to know what you thought about, like why would this be the thing that pushes them over the top?
Well, because I think Sardou thinks that what he's doing is art, and when he's torturing these women on stage, it's a performance that's meant for an audience, and that it means something, and it's art. And he thinks that this doctor is just vulgar for doing these things for his own pleasure.
I would agree with that. The thing that makes me not think that a little bit is just all like when they're playing backgammon and chopping off the women's fingers just for the hell of it.
I guess that's true.
But I mean, that makes it makes the most sense. Did you listen to, on the Troma DVD, and it's on the Blu-ray, Eli Roth commentary?
No, I listened to it back when the DVD first came out, and I mean no disrespect to Mr. Roth. I didn't listen to the whole thing back then because I remember at the time just thinking, who's this fucking guy? What do I need some guy who's my age telling me about Bloodsucking Freaks? So no, I haven't heard his whole commentary. I watched the new interview with him, which was actually really good.
His commentary, it should be something I feel like everyone who's a fan of the movie should listen to, because it's really funny, especially if you've gone to film school where they're like dissecting Citizen Kane. He just starts pulling out all these like kind of film school things about Bloodsucking Freaks, which
like trying to be funny, or is he being serious?
He's playing it very serious, but the stuff he's saying is absolutely ridiculous. Like there's a scene where Natasha is wearing a yellow and blue leotard, and he was like, that is, the dark represents Sardou and the yellow represents Ralphus, and then cutting it off of her is the joining of the flesh and then coming together, like very film professor type stuff. But he's deadpanning it through the whole thing. He's like, and then just behind the scenes, he's like, you could see where filmmakers like Gabriel Friedman got their inspiration from Joel, and so like he's just like Gabe at the time was just editing for Troma, so it's it's pretty funny. You should listen to it. And then also another like hard to tell, because in the new interview he talks about reaching out to all these people he found like on Yahoo search who were in the movie. So he cuts their stories in with kind of like the film theory that that he created for Bloodsucking Freaks as another unreliable narrator for the making of the movie.
I'll have to go back and listen to it now.
It's, as a piece on its own, it's pretty funny. And it's crazy, too, because that was before Cabin Fever or anything.
Yeah, he wasn't even a filmmaker yet. That's why at the time, I remember just thinking, why do I need to hear this? But
I remember when Cabin Fever came out, I was like, wait a minute, why does that guy's name sound familiar?
It's blood and guts expert Eli Roth.
And it's like, oh, well, I guess he did know what he was talking about back then. And then there's a scene where they're trying to convince Natasha to join, where they are caning a woman as she is holding a rope in her mouth in the guillotine. And I guess Joel M. Reed said he in the book that he was doing some of the caning on there. So when people are upset about Quentin Tarantino choking out his actress in Inglourious Basterds, this
Joel Reed did it first.
Yeah, he took it maybe a step further. And I thought it was funny that the detective subplot, like you have this greasy cop named Tucci, and he's just a crooked cop, but you find out he's just a huge ballet nerd.
Yep.
Like something I never really caught on before, but like watching it this last time, it was pretty funny. And then he's like, well, I read in Variety that Natasha's actually acting in Sardou's show. And it's like, why is this, beat cop in New York City in the 70s reading Variety? Yeah. Cuts to the big show that Sardou has called The Artist, Seduction and Death of a Critic, where Natasha does absolutely terrible ballet.
Yes.
But she's topless, and she kicks Creasy Silo to death.
Kicked to death on stage. Yep.
Maverick and the cop decide to, bust up the operation after the show, and they let all the cannibal women out, and they eat all of our, I guess, the people can't call them heroes, but the people we've been following, and ends with probably one of the best final shots ever in a movie.
A big old dick hot dog bun.
Yeah, big old penis sandwich. Yeah, it's weird. This movie is definitely more offensive, like, as the years go on.
It is, and what's crazy to think, and I do this all the time now because I'm old, but even more so now, when I think about when I first saw it, it was probably 1989 or something. The movie was only 15 years old, and it seemed fucking ancient.
Yeah.
And that's like now, I don't even know, saying like,
American Pie.
like Saw or something like that. Like,
yeah.
So seeing that this movie's now like 45 years old, and yeah, I think it was probably played a lot. Well, I don't know if it played funnier back then, but it's way more offensive to have cage fulls of naked women now than it was back then. And I think they could get away with saying it was a joke a lot more back then. Whereas I think if this movie came out now, they'd get into a lot of trouble.
I was thinking like how crazy that would. I mean, it's crazy that they showed it on Joe Bob Briggs.
Yeah.
Anyways, like, it seems like that would really offend people. But he added context. Like, I just want them to do like what they did for like Titanic or Avatar, just re-release this in the theaters with no context.
That would be amazing.
Lloyd says like if they were to go back and have that opportunity again, they would definitely second guess putting this movie out. But they still probably would.
Dream, but
I wonder how much of that though is probably just the drama of dealing with Joel M. Reed.
Yeah, I think Lloyd probably had to deal with a bitching Joel Reed for 30 years until he died.
Yeah, and he died last year from COVID.
Yeah.
So he never, which sucks. The book is probably the closest we'll get to commentary.
Yeah.
Joel M. Reed, because Troma didn't want to pay to have that commentary done. Joel word on the street is Joel M. Reed was asking for the money he felt like he was owed from Troma, which wasn't a lot, but Troma is too much for Troma to pay. And, there's probably some interesting stories that we're not going to hear because of that.
Were you friends with him on Facebook? I was friends with him.
I was too. It was like, oh man, it's Joel M. Reed. And then it was a lot of out of focus cell phone pictures. and then just stories from like him being in a Korean War vet. That's really all he posted on Facebook. And towards the end of his life, he talked more about the movies he made, which I know there's a couple documentaries. There's one that's out now. I just found out about. It's on, I think it's like Reed Unbound, just about Joel M. Reed, and then Kevin Michaels, who worked on Poultrygeist, apparently is making one as well.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, it'd be interesting to see more about his life, because from everything I've read, this is the more extreme of all of his movies that he's made. I
saw Night of the Zombies 20 years ago, and I remember it not being especially good. And I tried to watch GI Executioner on Troma Now, and it was pretty tough.
I own GI Executioner, and I think I watched the trailer. I'm like, well, this will be one I'll revisit when I get to like episode like 300 or something.
Yeah.
And I have his movie Bloodbath, which is another horror movie, and the cover for that is basically the poster for Bloodsucking Freaks, but there's not very much gore in it, and it almost feels like a Amicus anthology film, which is weird to say, but not it. That also makes it sound a lot better than it is. But if I had to compare it to something, it'd be like an Amicus anthology.
All right. And then he never did anything again. He never did anything past the early 80s, right?
Yeah. Which I wonder how much of that is his world being so intertwined with the adult film industry. And then when that switched to video, I wonder how much of that kind of just halted his productions. All right. So at Caleb's Theater, we just showed Bloodsucking Freaks. What would be your double feature?
Well, in between Bloodsucking Freaks and the second feature, we would show the trailer for Hamburger the Rapist.
Hamburger, the club owner. Ladies and gentlemen, madame and monsieur, welcome to the world-famous Downtown Boner, where you will see some of the most amazing acts ever presented on this stage or any other. Hamburger, the swindler.
Hey, those are my frogs.
Now they're my frogs. Hamburger, the strangler.
What the fuck are you doing?
But this time, he's gone too far. Hope you enjoyed your Happy Meal. Wanted by his own girls.
Can't believe he killed Picante. We're gonna get that piece of shit.
Wanted by the FBI. Psh.
I got the place surrounded.
Whoa, you got it surrounded all by yourself? Psh.
Don't worry about it.
Wanted by the IRS. God damn it, Vince! Wanted by the super police. Stop! Wanted by the French mafia.
Mais obtenir ce salaud, c'est la dernière chose que j'ai fait.
Il n'est pas sa foi foxy. Fait ça.
Je voudrais avoir un hamburger.
Dans les bouches. Dans les bouches. Hamburger, c'est cherché par le squid squatch.
T'as dit, allez chercher le squid squatch.
Oui.
Oh, voulez bien aller?
On pourrait manger. Dans des palais et des caquettes.
They need you now. They need you. It's the bastard hamburger. You must catch up with him.
C'est les vaches. Hamburger,
He pisses for destiny, but fucks for revenge.
Burger baby! Who's your burger baby?
Fromage, Chevrolet, Coupe de Ville.
We can't go on.
We have to go on stage.
Hamburger, he's therapeutic. It's Stockholm Syndrome for the poor girls when the gators come home to rape their dear master. Hamburger, tout le monde les veut.
I want him.
Hamburger, coming soon to go fuck yourself.
Because that's also about a performance troupe. But in that one of the dancers is raped and murdered, and then the other girls all band together to hunt down Hamburger, who is played by Dookie Flyswatter, who is the Stardew of Hamburger the Rapist. So that would play in the middle. It couldn't be a double feature because there is no movie. There's only a trailer.
And Dookie Flyswatter, for those out there, he plays Mengele in Surf Nazis Must Die.
Yeah, and he wrote what was the sequel to Blood Feast? Blood
Diner.
Yep.
And which is funny because you filmed the trailer in the California Institute for Abnormal Arts, which is owned by Carl Crew, who's in Blood Diner.
Yes, and Dookie's also the lead singer of Haunted Garage, who are awesome. Anyway, so yeah, the middle of the double feature in the trailers would be Hamburger the Rapist, but then the second feature would be King of Comedy.
And I'm thinking as I'm sitting here now, well, maybe this is my big break. This is my big chance, you know what I mean?
You don't just walk on to a network show without experience. Now, I know it's an old hackneyed expression, but it happens to be the truth. You got to start at the bottom.
I know, that's where I am, at the bottom.
That's a perfect place to start. So will you please give your warmest greetings to the newest king of comedy, Rupert Pupkin.
His name is Rupert Pupkin. He lives in a world of make-believe.
Oh, Jerry, I love this guy. Always coming up with these great lines. I love him.
Nobody can remember his name.
Mr. Pipkin. Mr. Pupnik.
Mr. Puffer.
Rupert.
Pupkin, Pupkin.
But by 11:30 tonight, the whole world will know that Rupert Pupkin is the new king of comedy. Robert De Niro, Jerry Lewis, in a Martin Scorsese picture, the king of comedy.
Which I know is a weird choice. Tone-wise, a weird choice. But, if you look at the plots, Bloodsucking Freaks is about a struggling artist who's trying to put on a show, and when he can't get the performer he wants to be in his show, he kidnaps her and forces her, and then when he can't get a critic to write about it, he kidnaps the critic and forces him to be involved. And then King of Comedy is, of course, about a horrible stand-up comedian, Rupert Pupkin, and all he wants to be is on the Jerry Langford show, which is supposed to be like the Tonight Show. And when he can't get anyone to pay attention to his comedy, he kidnaps Jerry Langford, and the ransom is that they have to allow him to perform his horrible stand-up comedy on TV. And even though he's terrible and he gets arrested and goes to jail at the end, he then gets out and it worked and he's famous.
When you suggested King of Comedy, I was like, oh, I kind of just want to rent out a theater to do that double feature.
It would be good. Well, at first I was thinking Taxi Driver because of all it's the same area as Bloodsucking Freaks, and it's the same time period as Bloodsucking Freaks, and there's a lot of the same, gross 1975 New York exteriors of steam coming out of things, and then I thought, well, King of Comedy would be better.
I looked up through the IMDb credits just to see if there's any Troma connections there. So one of the PAs, Guy J. Lathon, he was a PA on Lloyd's movie Stuck on You.
Okay.
The negative cutter, Donna Bassett, she was the negative cutter on the last horror film. Ralph Monaco, who plays Raymond Wirtz, he plays Jerry in Zombie Island Massacre. And then Robert De Niro is in the Troma movie that Brian De Palma directed, The Wedding Party.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you did more homework than me.
Man, that was a grueling IMDb to go to, because I clicked on each person and it's like, fuck, they have 200 credits under their name. So that was fun. My double feature, I thought I would go, if you could say that Bloodsucking Freaks would fit in perfectly into the gritty Christopher Nolan Batman universe.
Yep.
This other one would fit perfectly in the Adam West Batman universe as a bad guy. 1970 Herschel Gordon Lewis movie, Wizard of Gore.
We're about to show you a few scenes of this movie, which is called The Wizard of Gore. For those of you who appreciate this type of cinematic art, you will see the most startling scenes of their type ever filmed. But for those of you with heart conditions, or who are with young and impressionable children, we ask that you turn around in your seats or leave this auditorium for the next 2 minutes. Thank you.
I am Montag, master of illusion. Your eyes may see, but your mind may refuse to believe. Permit me to show you a few of the tricks I perform in the Wizard of Gore. My good friends, perhaps you think I excuse myself from those activities you've just seen. No. You see, I'm not afraid to stick my neck out.
Motion picture of all time, The Wizard of Gore. This film will take its place in motion picture history as a milestone of extraordinary achievement. Never before have the weird, the eerie, the astonishing, the bewildering been shown in so stunning a film. Behind the facade of a normal world lies another world, whose grisly mystery brings panic to some, satisfaction to others. An astounding achievement in bizarre, amazing theater, The Wizard of Gore.
I don't know if I believe this or not, but Joel M. Reed says he was not aware of Herschel Gordon Lewis until after Bloodsucking Freaks came out.
I believe that. I mean, I don't think Herschel Gordon Lewis really, if you weren't a teenager in the 60s or a teenager when VHS came out in the 80s, I believe he could have gone without knowing who Herschel Gordon Lewis was. He was an adult in New York in the 70s. I believe it.
It's pretty funny how similar the stories are. Wizard of Gore follows Montag the Great, or Montag the Magnificent, who he's a stage magician where he brings women up on stage and dismembers them. And then it turns out they're all okay until they leave the theater, and they die the same way they died on stage, whether it's like with a metal press or getting chopped with a chainsaw. And the blood in Wizard of Gore and Bloodsucking Freaks is that, just like kind of fun Technicolor tempera paint. Yeah.
That would be a killer double feature.
And you were saying, because we were talking about double features, that in college you wrote a paper on Wizard of Gore and Bloodsucking Freaks.
I did. I don't remember. I was said I went to art school, and I took I think it was for a performance art class or something, and we had to write a paper about how one art movement from a long time ago affected another art movement from a different time or something like that. So I wrote about the parallels of the Grand Guignol and Bloodsucking, and how they inspired and turned into things like Bloodsucking Freaks and Wizard of Gore.
The two movies are pretty complimentary of each other.
Sure.
The Herschel Gordon Lewis's movie is definitely, though, a lot sillier, like, slapstick, I would almost say, as opposed to Bloodsucking Freaks.
And Bloodsucking Freaks, as much as it's pretty well made, and Herschel's movies, as much as they are fun, are not really as well.
Yeah, I mean, at least in Wizard of Gore, as opposed to like Blood Feast, he's getting better at coverage.
Yeah,
but his continuity is still something.
His continuity is lighting, sound. It's all pretty low end, and like Bloodsucking Freaks for a shitty movie. It looks okay. The sound is good, which is always one of the telling signs if you're watching a crappy movie is if you can't hear anything, and the sound in that is good and has a really interesting score. I think he had a lot more talent trying hard.
Yeah.
To do their jobs in Bloodsucking Freaks than in Wizard of Gore.
I would agree. Well, I think that about wraps up this episode. Is there what's new for you, Caleb? Anything new coming out?
Anything new? I got a new screenplay I just finished that I can't get anyone to read. So adapted a novel, and I owe credit to someone, and I cannot think of who it is. I don't remember who it is. Someone wrote a review of this novel and said, this needs to get turned into a movie directed by Caleb Emerson.
Oh, shit.
Okay, well, I have to read this novel now. So I ordered it, and it's amazing, and I optioned it from the writer, and I adapted it. It's called Night of the Assholes, and it is a direct parody of Night of the Living Dead, except instead of zombies, everyone in the world is turning into assholes.
Oh,
not like anatomical buttholes, but just like annoying, shitty people.
Yeah.
And it's fucking hilarious. And I think if the right person reads it, it could, I don't want to do this as a micro budget. I think it needs to be sort of a real movie. And I've entered that into a bunch of screenwriting competitions, and I'm trying to get it into someone's hands, and I'm not having any luck. Shockingly, not a lot of people want to read a script called Night of the Assholes, but
I'll send it. Sounds fun.
Want to read it back? Buy the book, but also I'll send you the screenplay if you want to read it.
I do. Yeah, send that to me.
It's written by Kevin Donaghy. He's one of the bigger name guys in the bizarro fiction world, which is like I don't know if you're familiar, but sort of a new form of surrealism where it's just real bonkers, sometimes kind of nonsense, but great fiction. And this one, it went off on a lot of tangents that I trimmed down to make it a little closer to the Night of the Living Dead original, but it's real weird and surreal and funny. And aside from that, I'm just out here. I'm an editor. That's my day job, and just editing TV.
Awesome. And where can people follow you on the social medias?
You follow me on Facebook. It's just under my name, Caleb Emerson, and I have a Instagram too, and I share my paintings there. I paint I said I went to art school. I show in some galleries around LA. You can check out my weird art. Some of it's on my website too, CalebEmerson.com.
Awesome. And you can follow me at Lego Larry on Twitter and Instagram. You can follow the show on Twitter at Talkin Troma. And as always, stay traumatized.